In the 1980s, China was one of the poorest countries in the world. Most people had never even seen a television or sat in an airplane. Most farmers used wooden plows for farming, and the average Chinese worker earned less than $1 a day. Fast forward to today. China builds more skyscrapers in a single year, as compared to what United States has built in its entire existence. It manufactures over 28% of everything the world buys and trades in different countries. From iPhones to IKEA furniture to the solar panels on your neighbor's roof, everything in the world is being manufactured by China today. So now the question arises, how did this happen? How did a country go from bicycles and dry farms to bullet trains and space rockets in just 4 decades? Let's find out. To understand how developed China is today, we first need to understand the history of China. In 1949, after decades of civil war and foreign invasion, Mao Zedong proudly stood in Tiananmen Square and declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. The country was in ruins. Hundreds of millions were starving, and industries barely existed. At that time, China's GDP per capita was somewhere around $50 per year. Yes, you heard it right, just $50 per year. Mao's government took control of everything: the farms, the factories, the trade, and even education. The idea was that the Communist Party would plan and run the entire economy from the top down. Mao launched a campaign called the Great Leap Forward, a crash program to industrialize China overnight. Farmers were ordered to smelt steel in their backyards. Agricultural land was abandoned, and as expected, the results were catastrophic. Between 15 and 55 million people died in the famine that followed after, and it's known the worst famine to happen in human history. Then came the Cultural Revolution, a decade of chaos where schools were closed, intellectuals were persecuted, and anyone who seemed too educated or too Western was punished. An entire generation lost access to proper education. By the time Mao died in 1976, China had a massive, hard-working population, but almost no modern industry, no foreign investment, no free market, and no global trade connections. China was suffering massively, and the foundation of the miracle was yet to be laid. 2 years after Mao's death, a short, chain-smoking, twice-purged politician named Deng Xiaoping rose to power. Deng was different from Mao in one crucial way, as he was a pragmatist. He didn't care about ideology as much as results. His most famous quote says it all: "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." In other words, capitalism, communism, whatever works. In December 1978, Deng announced what would become the most consequential economic decision of the 20th century: reform and opening up. Known in China as Geopolitics. What did this actually mean? First, let farmers sell their own food. Up till now, all food belonged to the state, but Deng allowed farmers to sell surplus crops in the open market, and almost immediately, the agricultural output exploded. Farmers had a reason to work harder and earn more. Second, open the door for foreign businesses. For the first time, foreign companies were allowed to invest in China, build factories, and hire Chinese workers as their workforce. And third, create special economic zones. This was the masterstroke that changed everything. Rather than reforming the entire country all at once, Deng picked a few small areas and promptly said that, in these zones, capitalism will be allowed. Post this announcement in 1980, the first 4 special economic zones were set up in Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Shantou, and Xiamen. At the time, Shenzhen was a fishing village with a population of just 30,000 people. And within 20 years, it became a city of 12 million and the electronics manufacturing capital of the world. This was China's launchpad. The 1980s were when the engine truly started. Foreign companies saw something irresistible in China: a massive, disciplined workforce willing to work even with low wages. At the time, a Chinese factory worker earned around $30 to $50 per month. The foreign companies realized that this meant they could manufacture the same product for a fraction of the cost as compared to the rest of the world. The early products were basics such as toys, textiles, shoes, and simple electronics. Nothing fancy, but volume was enormous. Hong Kong manufacturers flooded across the Shenzhen border, setting up factories almost overnight. By the mid-1980s, the Pearl River Delta region, a stretch of land connecting Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Dongguan, had become one of the most productive manufacturing corridors in the world. Then began what we call the Great Internal Migration. Millions of young people from rural provinces such as Sichuan, Henan, Hunan, began moving to the cities looking for factory jobs. These were called migrant workers, and by the early 1990s, hundreds of millions of people had made this journey. It was the largest human migration in history. They lived in dormitories, worked 12-hour shifts, and sent money home to their families. Their sacrifice powered China's rise to global manufacturing dominance. The 1990s were when China went from a local story to a global phenomenon. The three factors that supercharged China's growth were: Number 1. The fall of the Soviet Union. When the USSR collapsed, the world's ideological battle between capitalism and communism effectively ended. Western countries became much more comfortable doing business with communist China, because now it seemed like capitalism had won, and China was clearly moving in that direction economically. Number 2. Jiang Zemin doubles down on markets. China's new leader Jiang Zemin and his economic czar Zhu Rongji pushed reforms even further. They privatized thousands of state-owned companies, cut millions of government jobs, and aggressively courted foreign investment. And number 3. The rise of Walmart. Yes, you heard it right. In the 1990s, American retail giants, especially Walmart, built supply chains directly into China. Walmart's obsession with low prices meant it constantly pressured its suppliers to cut costs. And the easiest way to cut costs? Make it in China. By 1993, Walmart was sourcing billions of dollars of products from Chinese factories. Other American companies followed, then European companies, then companies from everywhere. A statistic that shows China's dominance is that in 1990, China's total exports were worth about $62 billion. By 2000, that number had risen to $249 billion. In just 10 years, China's exports grew by 400%. The world wasn't just buying from China. The world was becoming dependent on China. If the 1980s were the launch and the 1990s were the acceleration, then 2001 was the afterburner. On December 11, 2001, China officially joined the World Trade Organization, the WTO. This was a massive deal. Here's why. Before joining the WTO, other countries could put high taxes, called tariffs, on Chinese goods. This made Chinese products more expensive and limited. After joining the WTO, those tariffs had to be dramatically reduced or eliminated. Chinese products could now flow freely into every market in the world. The effect was almost immediate and staggering. China's exports jumped from $266 billion in 2001 to over $1.2 trillion by 2007. That's nearly 5 times growth in just 6 years. American and European companies realized they could cut their manufacturing costs by 30 to 60% simply by moving production to China. Factories in the U.S. Midwest started closing. The jobs moved east. This period is what economists call the China shock, and it reshaped the entire global economy. A good example of China shock would be the case of Apple. When Steve Jobs relaunched Apple with the iMac in 1998 and then the iPod in 2001, he needed a manufacturing partner who could produce millions of complex devices quickly and cheaply. He found it in Foxconn, a Taiwanese company with massive factories in China. Foxconn's factory in Shenzhen, called Longhua Science and Technology Park, became known as iPhone City. It employed over 300,000 workers at its peak, all in one campus. When the iPhone launched in 2007, Foxconn could ramp up production faster than any factory in America ever could. The phrase that defined this era, designed in California, assembled in China. While factories were humming, China was building something else in parallel. The most ambitious infrastructure program in modern history. Number 1. High-speed rail. In 2007, China had virtually no high-speed rail. Today, it has over 45,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, more than the rest of the world combined. Number 2. Highways. China's expressway network went from nearly zero in 1988 to over 177,000 kilometers today, the longest highway network on Earth, surpassing even the United States. Number 3. Ports. 7 of the world's 10 busiest container ports are in China. The port of Shanghai handles more cargo than any port in the world, over 47 million container units per year. Number 4. Cities. Between 1990 and 2020, China went from being roughly 27% urban to 64% urban. That means roughly 500 million people moved from rural areas to cities in 30 years. To house them, China built entire cities from scratch. While some became huge cities for tourism, others became industrial giants with high manufacturing capacities. Chongqing, a city most Westerners have never heard of, has a population larger than Australia. It's one of the world's largest automotive manufacturing centers. All of this infrastructure served one purpose: making it faster, cheaper, and easier to make things and ship them to the world. By 2010, something important started happening. Chinese wages were rising. Workers who had earned $50 a month in 1990 were now earning $500, $600, even $800 a month. This was great for Chinese people, but it meant simple, cheap manufacturing was starting to make less sense. Other countries, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Cambodia, were now cheaper for basic goods. China had two choices: lose manufacturing to cheaper countries or move up the ladder. So in 2015, Beijing launched a national strategy called Made in China 2025. The goal was to dominate 10 advanced industries by 2025. The government poured hundreds of billions of dollars into these sectors through subsidies, state-owned enterprises, and directed lending. And the results have been remarkable. China is now the world's largest EV market and producer. BYD surpassed Tesla in global EV sales in 2023, and apparently Chinese EVs cost 30 to 40% less than Western equivalents. Another example would be drones. DJI, a company based in Shenzhen, controls roughly 70% of the global consumer drone market. Talking about solar panels, China produces over 80% of the world's solar panels. The price of solar energy has crashed globally, largely because Chinese manufacturers drove costs down so aggressively while providing great quality. China isn't just making the world's stuff anymore. It has starting to design and engineer and innovate the world's stuff too. Apart from manufacturing and innovation of products, China has also been developing infrastructure in other countries at a large scale. In 2013, President Xi Jinping announced one of the most ambitious geopolitical projects since the Marshall Plan, the Belt and Road Initiative. The idea was simple. China would lend money and build infrastructure, ports, railways, roads, power plants, across Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. In return, China would gain trade partners, political allies, and access to natural resources. Over 150 countries have signed on till now, and China has actually delivered many such projects. China has financed or built a railway from Nairobi to Mombasa in Kenya, a deep-sea port in Gwadar, Pakistan, a high-speed rail line in Laos, or power plants across Africa, ports in Sri Lanka, Greece, and Malaysia. Some critics call this debt trap diplomacy, arguing that when countries can't repay loans, China gains strategic leverage, while supporters say China is filling an infrastructure gap that Western countries ignored for decades. Whatever your view might be, the strategic outcome is clear. China has built economic and political relationships with most of the developing nations and has set an example for the rest of the world on how they can completely change the fate of their country in less than 4 decades. To sum it all, China's story is not perfect. It is complicated, contested, and ongoing. But it is, without question, one of the most fabulous transformations in human history. A country that couldn't feed itself in 1960 now feeds the entire world's hunger for goods. A country where bicycles were the main form of transport now builds the world's fastest trains. Whatever comes next is uncertain and unpredictable. But these last 4 decades of China will be studied by economists, historians, and leaders for centuries. And that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like and share, and subscribe our channel for more such interesting videos. Goodbye.